This episode of Mission Log is brought to you by the official Star Trek Starships collection. Get the Enterprise D for only $4.95 when you sign up today at st-starships.com/missionlog.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 197, Silicon Avatar.
Hey-ho, neighboritos. Welcome to another edition of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm John Champion, and you know the score. Each week on Mission Log, we pick apart a single episode of Star Trek, mining it for the morals, meanings, and messages, and to ask ourselves whether the whole thing stands the test of time.
This week, Silicon Avatar, a notable title for two reasons. First, it is the episode of Next Gen wherein we re-encounter the crystalline entity. Silicon Avatar, though, also notable because it's the name of my Missing Persons cover band.
Oh, this guy, I love Missing Persons.
Yeah, and the band, fingers crossed, should be big as a cover band gets. We're at the Rickshaw Stop this Friday night, by the way, at 9. I know you're saying, wait, when was this recorded? Don't worry about it. Any Friday night at 9, the Rickshaw Stop, Silicon Avatar, ask for me by name.
Ken, before we move into the show, we get the privilege of talking about our sponsor again. That is the Star Trek Starships collection. And I mentioned last week how the thing that really excites me about these models is that CBS is an active participant in this. It's not just the fact that they are a licensed product, but everybody who has been behind the shows actively participates in how these models are made to make sure that they are as accurate as can possibly be. I'm actually, as we record this, I'm sitting here looking at my little collection of starships, and I'm blown away. I can actually, the sunlight is coming in through the warp nacelles of the Enterprise 1701 refit. And it's just super cool. And I actually can see that through the NX-01, too. You
know what's so weird to me is I normally just sit here and stare at them, but I actually picked up one of the ships when you started talking. And the one I picked up was the 1701 refit, and I'm holding it up to my lamp, and yeah, same thing. It's really cool because you say, well, there's no way they can light these up. And you're right. Because, I mean, they're impressive, but they're also about 4 inches, maybe. Mm-hmm. And if you were talking about, lighting and electronics, you'd be talking about a much more expensive thing that probably wouldn't look quite as realistic, right?
Right.
But, use what you got.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
the nacelles are made of something translucent. And so, well, parts of them are anyway. And so what looks like, would be lighting up, it's got light passing right through it. They're just nifty little things.
Yeah, and actually, and the same thing on the NX-01 as I look at that, it's got the little transparent part. Oh, I just knocked one over.
I did the same thing a minute ago. I was sure you had picked it up. Sorry.
Yeah, keep that in there.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at the paint job on this, and just everything is so perfectly scaled, perfectly detailed. You can see the little turrets where the phase cannons are. It's just so cool. I'm constantly blown away by how good they are for something to be that small and very inexpensive. The thing that's cool to me is that once you subscribe to this collection, not one of them, but 2 show up every month. So, twice the opportunity to be surprised and delighted by this collection. And what's better, the longer you stay in the collection, the more bonus gifts you get. Everything from like dedication plaques, and those are really sweet looking. I don't know if you looked those up or not. Mm-hmm. But they are really, really cool. And then variations on other ships. So like the Borg Cube versus the Borg Sphere. The longer you're in the collection, the more of those exclusives you get. And they don't charge you anything more for those exclusives. So I absolutely am a huge fan of this collection. I'm not just here to talk about it to our listeners. I am a fan and a collector. Each model is cast, like I said before, on another one of our ads, that it's in this sort of a metallic resin. So it's got a good heft to it. It's got a good feel to it. They have a nice weight. And it comes with a display base, and it comes with that collector's magazine that I know that you love because you get so much more background information about each ship.
Yeah, that is really cool. Although I will tell you, honestly, the coolest thing, because we've been doing these ads, like I want to say 3 or 4 weeks now. Mm-hmm. And at first, we're like, boy, do we love these. Mm-hmm. And that's great, because we do. What's been really cool, though, is getting feedback from people who have signed up now and who really love them, too. That's been the best thing. I've seen one negative thing, and it was that actually something broke in the mail. I feel certain that it was replaced, so I'm not even worried about that. But that's like the one negative thing was like, oh, something bad happened that actually had nothing to do with the ship itself, nor the production, nor the quality. People really are digging these quite a bit, and that's my favorite part. I got another show that I do too, and I love having sponsors, I love having advertisers, but my favorites are the ones when people then write to me and say, wow, you're right, this is awesome. So it's not just us saying it, it's a bunch of other people who have signed up too. And then, of course, they let you get in really easily. Your first ship, the 1701D, which I think might be in an episode or two of Next Gen. I can't remember, but
I've heard of it, yeah.
You get that one, you start off for $4.95, and that includes shipping. So, it really couldn't be an easier thing to start to check out the quality. And if you're not hooked, you can cancel, and the worst thing that happens is you have a 1701D. And who doesn't want that? Exactly. Right. That's the worst thing that happens to you this week. You're sitting pretty.
Exactly. And like I said, 2 more come directly to your door every month. You can cancel your subscription at any time, but honestly, why would you?
Yeah.
They keep coming out with cool models. They are amazing, and you can get so much more detail, all the information that we've been talking about at the sponsor website, st-starships.com/mission log. Make sure you use that address because, you want to let them know that you heard about it on Mission Log. And we're fans, and we want to make you fans of the official Star Trek Starships collection as well.
That website again is st-starships.com/mission log. And I mentioned people are actually writing to us, getting in touch with us, letting us know what they thought. If you want to tell us what you think of the ships yourself, or if there's anything else about which you would like to get in touch with us, Mission Log Pod is the address to find us on Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. If you want to leave us a voicemail, we'd love that. Our phone number is 323-522-5641. Our email address is missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our show website, including discovered documents and other places to leave comments, is at missionlogpodcast.com. And please do remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log. And now, everything is just as it should be as we warp into trivia.
That's pretty good.
That's all right. We'll try something.
I like it.
It's better than half impulsing into trivia.
It is. Yeah, nobody wants that. Nobody wants that kind of trivia. So today's show, Silicon Avatar. The teleplay was written by Jerry Taylor. Now, she and actually most everybody on the writing staff did not want to do a sequel. And honestly, nobody was that excited about the idea of using the crystalline entity again. But she really liked the idea of a Moby Dick style story and went with it. Now, the story is actually by Lawrence V. Conley. It turns out he took a bus from Oregon to be able to pitch the story. He was a freelancer, just another one of those guys who was able to get in a story with that open submission policy. This is his only professional screen credit. Today's show is directed by Cliff Bole, who we've mentioned many times before. And hey, what about the title, Silicon Avatar? Neither the words crystal nor entity are in that. The Silicon Avatar is actually Data taking the place of Dr. Marr's son. Jerry Taylor liked the definition of Avatar as being, quote, a god in human form, or as more precisely a repository of knowledge. So that's how we arrive at that title. Now, a couple little details here. Malona, as in the location of the colony, Malona 4, it is actually a delicious melon-flavored frozen treat made in Korea. Yeah. Haven't had one myself, but if we have any listeners in Seoul, please send us some. We have a reference to the Brechtian cluster, so if you love German theater and the concept of alienation, then you should go there. And Data is playing a piece on the guitar by 19th century Spanish guitarist Francisco Tárrega. We have a location here. We do have exterior locations that were filmed at the Golden Oak Ranch near Santa Clarita, California. Disney bought that 900-acre ranch in 1959. You've seen many other productions use it. Back to the Future, Mad Men, of course, the Mickey Mouse Club.
Spin and Marty.
Spin and Marty, there you go. Now, it is interesting because this is very, very newsworthy. It is right next door to the Sable Ranch, another Hollywood location ranch. Very famous, has been used in a lot of films and TV shows. And it actually burned 2 days ago. We've had some pretty intense wildfires in Southern California. Golden Oak is okay as of this recording, but there was a lot of concern that it would be the next to go.
We normally try to not be timely about this, but since you just named something that was very of the moment, should we do the date?
Sure.
It is the 25th of July, 2016. I almost said 19 because, but no, 2016.
2016.
So, you are now pinned to this moment in history as far as what's going on in L.A. or around L.A., I suppose.
Exactly. It has been in the news. It is newsworthy, and we'll see how long it continues to be in the news. Hopefully not for long, not for that reason. We'd have some recycling in this episode. The matte painting of the destroyed Malona 4 was also used in The Survivors, as were a few of the costumes from that same episode. The entity itself, as we mentioned in Datalore, was computer generated the first time around and not a sufficient resolution to use in the HD remastering. So it was completely rebuilt for the remastering project. We talked a little more about that in Datalore. Now, we have two guest stars that we need to talk about. We have Susan Dial as Cameron Davila. Susan is from the Midwest. She got her start on soap operas and then as a regular on the very short-lived TV series Hot House. After The Next Generation, she had guest roles in a number of high-profile shows, Murphy Brown, Wings, Seinfeld, Quantum Leap, and she will be back for more Trek with 2 guest roles on Voyager. Then we have Ellen Geer as Dr. Kila Marr. Ellen comes from a family of actors, and in fact, she has been working most of her adult life as an actor. She played one of Jimmy Stewart's kids on The Jimmy Stewart Show in the early 70s. In a little different style, around that same time, she was also one of Harold's arranged dates in Harold and Maude. If you remember the scene where he commits harikari,
was that
her.
Her? I was trying to remember. Her. I knew she was not the one that was there when he caught himself on fire.
No.
But I couldn't remember which one she was. Okay.
So you say that and I laugh. And for people who have never seen that movie, you don't understand why I think that's incredibly funny. But Harold and Maude is a great, great movie. Please go see it. Since then, she has appeared in a huge number of TV shows. She actually has played 4 different characters on 5 episodes of Chips. She was a recurring character on Falcon Crest, Beauty and the Beast, and more recently she shows up on Desperate Housewives, Medium, The Mentalist, and more. Now, she heads the Theatrical Botanicum in Topanga Canyon, California. That's the position that she took over after her father passed away in the late 70s. I wish I had known that. I was actually out there a couple of years ago to see a show. And yes, we have to admit there is kind of a bad edit to a shot of her holding her tricorder upside down. And all the Star Trek fans took a collective gasp when they saw that. No big deal, though. I'll just assume that she can read it in both directions.
This episode starts quick, then slows considerably, then picks up again, then slows down some more. Then it sort of coasts. Then it picks up again. Then it slows down, then picks up again.
Prologue. On the surface of Malona 4, Riker is learning about the new settlements that will be built on this gorgeous green planet by one of its colonists, Carmen Davila. His mind is turning to making green memories of his own. Riker proposes dinner, and Carmen is quick to accept. On the menu, chicken curry and wine. But before we can actually learn what will be for dessert, a rumbling noise comes from the sky, followed by the appearance of a fearsome enemy we haven't seen since Season 1, the crystalline entity. Everybody out of the pool. Act 1. It's a scene of chaos as the crystalline entity destroys wide swaths of everything on the planet, trees, grass, and it's trying for the people. Sadly, Carmen and the old man she stopped to help were killed. With the rest of the colonists moved into a cave for cover, Riker and Data use their phasers to seal off the entrance by blasting rocks. The metals in the cave rock might be enough to deflect the entity, for now anyway, surmises Data. Dr. Crusher says everyone else is okay. despite a few minor injuries. The phasers are used again to light up a few rocks overhead, and now the colonists sit and wait. Riker's not sure about the air supply, and air supply is all out of love, but it'll have to do until the Enterprise gets there to rescue them all. Lucky for everyone, the Enterprise was able to pick up the weird disturbances going on at Malona 4 from quite a long distance and is now warping there. As the air gets thinner and the sweat starts pouring, a landing party headed by Worf arrives in time to rescue those trapped in the cave. Outside the cave, total desolation. The crystalline entity has wiped out everything in sight. Act 2. With the intention to pursue the entity, the Enterprise crew is joined by Dr. Kila Marr, a xenologist who has spent a long time studying the entity. She beams aboard, greeted by Commander Riker, and she's excited about meeting the survivors in a kind of creepy, almost too excited way, like she needs to tone it down a little. First thing first, she needs to attend a briefing with the captain. There, we learn what we've already seen, that the entity used every living thing, even down to the bacteria on the planet, to create energy for itself. The metallic elements in the cave wall may have saved the colonists, and Dr. Marr is giddy at the prospect of interviewing the survivors after she sees the destruction for herself. Picard insists that Data go along with her landing party. He knows more about this than just about anybody. After all, he's from Omicron Theta. His brother knew the entity. Oh. Okay, yeah, there might be some reservations, but she should really take Data. Back in the cave with the landing party, Data is doing what he does, pleasantly reporting on science things. Dr. Marr is completely and conspicuously ignoring him. She even tells him so. And she really lets him know what's on her mind. Because Data's brother, Lore, was in contact with the crystalline entity on Omicron Theta, she suspects Data may be the reason the entity came back and spared the people on Malona 4. One other thing. It's personal. Dr. Marr's 16-year-old son died on Omicron Theta because of the entity. That's why she's obsessed with it. And that is why if she finds out Data had anything to do with this, she will go full Bruce Maddox on his android body. Act 3. Geordi LaForge, Data, and Dr. Marr convene in engineering to science the science with the readings taken from Malona 4. They're comparing soil samples, looking at nitrates. Guys, there is so much science going on right now. Then Data suggests they look at gamma radiation, which might reveal traces of antiprotons, which Dr. Marr totally dismisses. But Geordi says, wait, Data can science the science better than any scientist can science. You really should give it a shot. And what do you know? They do, and it does. There's a pattern of antiprotons left behind by the entity when it wrecks stuff, and then again when it travels. Should be easier to track now. Dr. Marr kind of reluctantly thanks Data, but he informs her that his inspiration came from the logs of a scientist who lived on the doomed colony of Omicron Theta. Those notes hadn't been published, but if Dr. Marr really had been paying attention when we were watching Data lore, she'd know that Data was programmed with the knowledge and experiences of many of those colonists. On the bridge, the two report their findings to Picard. The good news being that they can track the entity in space. The bad news being that Dr. Marr seems hell-bent on killing the entity with photon torpedoes. Picard is all for being cautious and using defensive measures if needed. But it's time he explained to her what the opening monologue of every show is all about. Seeking out new life, not hunting it down and killing it. Seriously. Picard wants to try to communicate with the entity as long as it's safe to do so and use weapons only as a last resort. It may simply be a creature trying to sustain itself. He asked Dr. Marr to work with Data to explore the possibility of communication. In his quarters, Data is playing guitar when he's visited by an agitated Dr. Marr. She actually apologizes to him for her earlier behavior. They get to work on one of Data's theories about how to communicate with the entity, but soon enough, the conversation takes a slightly different direction. Dr. Marr asks about the Omicron Theta colonists and exactly how much of their thoughts and memories Data carries with him. She wants to know if he's carrying around anything from her son, Raymond. He is. He has access to his journals, and she wants to know what Raymond thought of her, if he blamed her for leaving him on Omicron Theta. She was busy, focused on her career, and Data reassures her that Raymond's journals reveal that he was indeed proud of his mother's career. Before he can say more, Riker calls for both to report to the bridge. It's a distress call from a ship called Callisto. They're being pursued by the crystalline entity and can't get away. As Picard talks to the captain of that ship, Data and Dr. Marr overhear their cries for help. It's a transport ship, not fast and not equipped with powerful enough weapons. A few seconds later, the crew are screaming as they're under attack, and then nothing. Picard orders the Enterprise course change to intercept the Callisto. Act 4. The Callisto is an empty shell. No living thing is left on board, not even a seed. It will be left behind with a notice sent to Starfleet. Meanwhile, the Enterprise will press on to find the crystalline entity. In the turbolift, Dr. Marr confides in Data. The screams of the crew of the Callisto made her think of her own son. She's racked with questions. Did he cry out for her? Did he wonder where she was? The entity is still on course for the Brechtian cluster, an area with 2 inhabited planets. On a side note, Picard informs Riker that Carmen's belongings will be returned to her parents should he wish to enclose a note. Riker agrees, and he also takes this moment to inform Picard that he thinks, just maybe, the entity should be destroyed. It has already killed thousands. What if stopping to communicate is unsuccessful, and they are responsible for even more deaths? Back in his quarters, Data and Dr. Marr work more on a possible communication standard by which they can contact the crystalline entity. While working, Dr. Marr asks more questions about what memories of her son Data has in his positronic brain. He knows details like how Rennie to his friends, liked to play Parisi squares, and how he also had a girlfriend, something Dr. Marr didn't even know. Then she asks something of Data that's a little strange. She wants to know if he can speak to her in Rennie's voice. And Data obliges by reading a letter that Rennie wrote in Rennie's voice. It's a day-to-day thing, talking about exams, going on an archaeological dig, his friends, and then how he misses his mom. It brings Dr. Marr to tears. Act 5. On the bridge, Data and Dr. Marr are in position while the Enterprise heads toward where the entity should be. To drag it out of hiding, they're using a graviton pulse, hoping to get its attention. And so they do. Here comes the crystalline entity right toward the ship, and Picard orders shields raised. The entity stops, perhaps sizing up the strange emissions from the Enterprise. Since it seems to be working, Dr. Marr and Data keep increasing the frequency of the graviton emissions. Then the entity responds in kind, essentially communicating with the pulses. This breakthrough might mean that the Enterprise crew can actually understand something of the entity. Dr. Marr changes tactics, returns to the computer, and enters some new commands. This time for a continuous graviton beam. The entity stops its transmissions as if it doesn't like the new output. Picard orders Dr. Marr to stop the continuous beam and return to the pulses, but she's now doing her impression of Dr. Marr ignoring Data in Act 2. As the tension builds, she gently touches Data's arm and says, "I did it for you, Rennie." The beam continues. When Dr. Marr initiated it, she locked access to the computer, and it can't be stopped. In a moment, the entity shatters. Dr. Marr is escorted back to her quarters by Data under confinement order from Picard. She holds his hand on the way, and once inside, she tells Data that as long as he's alive, then Rennie is alive. She tries to explain, confusing Data for Rennie, that she did it for him, that he might have peace at last through her actions. Data corrects her. There's nothing in his knowledge of Rennie that he would want his mother to kill the entity. He was proud of her career as a scientist. The contradiction of what she did means to Data that Rennie would now be very sad. The end.
Shades of Kivas Fajo there.
Oh, that very cold ending, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and it's sort of like Data having a girlfriend. Like, so we're done? I'll delete the program. Bye. Yeah, exactly. I don't even remember you. Yeah. Don't even remember.
I do a great teenage boy imitation, though, if you want to hear it sometime. Oh, too soon? Really?
Yeah, right.
I got to say, Omicron Theta was a really hopping place, right? Mm-hmm. Doctor was working on a new detection system there, the unnamed scientist. They actually named him in the show, but I noticed neither you nor I bothered to remember.
No.
Noonien Sung, of course, was building androids all over the place there. Mm-hmm. Rennie Marr is falling in love, getting really good at breezy squares. Mm-hmm. And then, this previously unseen entity just comes and, wipes the whole place out. It must be like some kind of nexus or something. Like a weird...
That's an interesting choice of words. Yeah.
What? A nexus?
Nexus? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. That's right. I forgot about that. Well, I mean, a weirdness magnet would be another good term for it if you want.
I like
wow,
that.
That's a hop in place right there. This is everything good happens here. Oh, and one incredibly bad thing.
Right. Yeah. It's really unfortunate. But I guess, that's kind of the neat thing about building this as a sequel, that we've gotten to add so much more meaning to what the crystalline entity is doing.
Yeah.
We already have this backstory about what happened to Omicron Theta, and then we open on this very idyllic scene, this beautiful landscape and all these, young, good-looking people about to build a colony, and they're so full of hope, and then sand trap. Then it is just turned into a massive sand trap.
Yeah.
Really unfortunate. But good thing for Starfleet in the future. I am really pleased to see that chicken curry survives into the future.
That is good, although sadly so do MREs.
Well, they might be great MREs in 300 years.
I don't know. Riker's like, really? We haven't gotten you a replicator yet? The idea of having to suffer through that for what promises to be an amazing dessert, apparently.
Yeah,
I wish
I really wish I knew
had said what that was. Yeah, exactly. I
really wish I knew.
Turkish delight, maybe? Is that what they're going to have? Or
could be
lady fingers?
Could be. Could be.
That actually seems possible.
It does. Yeah. But hey, once again, I'm really intrigued by the idea of colonies everywhere, because it always leaves me with these questions like how many people are actually left on Earth, and what are their motivations to leave?
Yeah.
It's sort of this escape to the suburbs. Just people are desperate to get out.
Oh my goodness, are you saying racism is what's driving people off of Earth?
No.
Because I'm under the impression that that's part of the reason that we have the suburbs.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, big planets, not many people.
Yeah, that's true. I think actually colonists are just the TNG answer to miners and TOS. Remember how every planet we went to, there were miners, and we still get miners from time to time on Next Gen. But really, colonists now are what we go for instead of miners these days, it seems.
Yeah. It's a little more poetic that way, I think. Now, we learned a new thing about the phasers. They have a kill setting, a blow up the rocks setting, a stun setting, and also a turn rocks into a light source. Meanwhile, the temperature in the cave just exceeded 9,000 degrees. They did that.
That's true. I can't remember. Did they actually do this? So remember when Sulu was caught on that planet with the dog in the unicorn costume?
I do remember that. It was in The Enemy Within, and he used the phasers to heat up the rock.
He did do that.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I thought he did. And yet still, they nearly died.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they totally did. But you cut back to the cave, and just everybody is sweating like crazy, and they're like, you could have used less phaser on the rock.
Yeah.
Or just followed the odd glowing blue light that's at the other end of the cave. Yeah.
That might have been helpful.
It's a TV thing, I know. I really love, when we get to go back and watch an episode several times and we get to pay attention to different things in the scenes. So watching Dr. Marr in the briefing room in Act 2, her body language every time Data speaks.
Right.
I sort of, not that I didn't notice it the first time around, but the second time around I thought, okay, now every time I watch Dr. Marr, in any scene, I'm just watching her reactions to the people around her. And it's great because Deanna is watching her. And that makes for a great bit of detail. You see Deanna sizing up those reactions that Dr. Marr is having to Data. And it's terrific. It's a great little bit that it kind of indicates where she's coming from, kind of indicates what's happening.
Yeah.
Go back and watch it again, and it's just like, oh, yeah, no, I see exactly what's going on here.
What I will say, though, is it brought up something else, and I know I've been saying this a lot lately, and I'm really hoping I get to stop saying it relatively soon. So Dr. Marr leaves, and Deanna says, well, you don't need an empath to know what's on her mind. And I'm thinking good thing, too, because once again, in this episode, we don't have one.
Yeah, right.
Because how did she not know that Dr. Marr was going to blow up the entity?
Yeah.
All she does is stand there and go, oh, something's wrong. Really? Because you know who's figured... Even Worf has figured out at that point that something is wrong. Right. And I'm not saying that Worf is dumb. I'm just saying he's not always the quickest to pick up, on the subtleties. Data, at that point, had picked up that something was wrong.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And then the empath is like, hey, wait, everybody. I think something's wrong. Oh,
yeah.
really
right.
Nice job, Kreskin.
Yeah, I think just for a second here, there's somebody full of hate and revenge. Let me look around. Let me look around. Okay.
Yeah, it could be her.
That one, not the android.
Right.
She has a good line in the cave. She says, I'm accusing you of collaborating with that monster. And the Data says, and I'm attempting to explain to you it is impossible. Now, I wanted that conversation to keep going because I wondered, was he actually going to get there? Because all he said so far is that he is programmed differently from Lore. Mm-hmm. That's it. He just said, like, yeah, that was Lore, and we're built differently. Mm-hmm. And then he says, I'm explaining to you that it's impossible. I haven't heard impossible yet. I've heard different. I've heard that you're different from Lore. But
right.
But of all the androids that we know in Star Trek, you're two of them.
Right, exactly. Like I said, like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, 50% of the androids are homicidal.
Right.
They're psychopathic. I mean, and so, yeah. And then the other thing about it, right, is remember the time that they said, oh, and by the way, Data's going to be the judge because Data can't lie.
Right.
Except the following week, Picard ordered Data to lie, and he's like, yes, sir, no problem. So, I mean, even if he does convince her, I would still think there'd be part of her going, yeah, but he could just be saying that.
Yeah.
Because that really is true. Ultimately, he could just be saying that.
Mm-hmm. And he'd be saying, like, hey, let me tell you about the time that I lied about firing a phaser at a guy who tried to kidnap me. You know?
Yeah. And didn't feel a thing about it.
Nope, not a thing.
So I had a question, actually. There's a discussion between Riker and Picard that we're going to hit in the next segment. Mm-hmm. But just for the mechanics of that segment, Riker wants to say something more to the captain, but he's not sure that he wants to.
Right.
And so he walks right up to the door, and the door doesn't open. And that's how Picard knows that Riker has something to say. How did the door know?
Oh, see, again, the door knows intention.
I'm telling you, the computer, the ship's computer, is keeping up with everything that's going on.
Oh, man, that's creepy.
It's weird. It's weird. Either that or it's just speed.
See, it's funny. You fixated on the door. I fixated on Riker standing behind the chair and kept thinking, man, I hope he straddles it. Man, I hope he just goes right over this chair to sit down. I kept thinking, this is another Riker sit moment.
Not that kind of conversation. Not that kind of conversation.
No,
Riker's not coming in Riker. He's not full Riker here.
No, he's not. No.
He's not Mr. Swagger on this one. He's going to say something to the captain. He's pretty sure. Captain's not going to, like, mostly because he's already heard the captain say, no, when that was mentioned before. And props, by the way, it wasn't Worf who said it. So that's good. Yes. We learned something about the crystalline entity that I don't think we knew to this point. Mm-hmm. Basically sucked the life out of the Callisto ship, right?
Yep.
And, like eating the cream in a Twinkie, but leaving the cake. And, of course, you do have to put cream and cake in quotes when we're talking about a Twinkie. But how did that happen exactly?
Yeah, it's interesting because we kind of see it just destroy everything in its path. But to do that, it's almost like a transporter thing.
Right. I mean, because so we should have come back out then to dirt and rocks and the table that Carmen was working on when they came out of the cave, right? If that's going to happen, unless it's the difference between feeding and a feeding frenzy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, well, I guess, actually think about it that way. If you're eating crab, when you come back, there is a shell there.
Right.
but when you're eating soft shell crab, it's like, there's no point, I'll just eat the whole thing. Well, that's true. Yes, the shell is usually destroyed, but I mean, you have to be careful to go in and get the meat. That's my point, which maybe you have to do on a spaceship as well. Whereas on a planet, you're just like, oh man, look at it all. Just like if you actually accidentally end up eating a car or a table, well, it's okay because mostly it was meat.
Yeah, all I can think of now is I really want a Twinkie.
Really? We mentioned crab. Now. We mentioned crab and Twinkie, and what you want is a Twinkie.
Well, I didn't say I wouldn't take both.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. I do have quite the appetite. Something else that bothers me here, when Dr. Marr says about Raymond, she said, I left him with his friends. I kept meaning to go back. And in my head, the voice that was yelling was saying he was 16 years old.
No, we don't know when she left him.
Hey, he could have been 11.
Well, he could have been 15.
Yeah, right. So he's 15. It's not just like going to summer camp. Here, I'm going to put you on a different planet.
Al, it's like boarding school in a way, right?
On a different planet.
Yeah, well, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, she's got enough to beat herself up about. I'm not going to beat her up about that.
No, I mean, here's the thing. She was racked with guilt about that, and understandably, because she didn't get to say goodbye to him, and he died in a tragic accident. I get that.
Right.
But just today, there was a conversation happening on our website, kind of going back to this conversation we've had before about all the orphans in Starfleet, how family structure is just completely different. Here's Jeremy Astor basically living on his own after his parents are gone. And, Wesley essentially being raised by the crew of the Enterprise,
right.
And then off to Starfleet Academy. And somebody made the point, well, maybe in the future this is sort of saying that everybody is responsible for everybody, trying to put a sort of a silver lining on this,
sure.
that it does take a village in this respect to raise everybody. And I thought, that's a really interesting argument. I really wonder what the upsides, what the downsides are of doing that, how those structures exist. And then I just kept thinking, 16-year-old kid on another planet. I kept coming back to that. But I'm glad for him. He gets to play Parrises Squares. He seems to be loving that. Shout out to a game that has already been mentioned in Trek before and will get mentioned again. So I like that little bit of consistency there. And there was a thing that I noticed that I'm sure you noticed too. I hope you noticed it. There's this look when Data says to Dr. Marr, he says that Rennie enjoyed his girlfriend's, quote, kindness, her gentleness, her physical attributes. Now, she's not looking at him when he says that, but as soon as the words come out of his mouth, that robot gets embarrassed. And he looks at her like, oops, I should not have said that.
I didn't get it.
You didn't get it?
Sorry.
Seriously?
I was trying to decide if I should get you to explain it. Yes, of course I got it. I did. It's like, I wonder if I could get him to say what, but then I remembered, we have one of those shows where people who get it, and people who don't are a little too young to get it right now.
Yeah, go back to our episode of Menage a Troy.
Yeah.
So, and then one last question that I had for you. How would Dr. Marr know that Data can sound like other people? Does he just go around doing his Picard impression everywhere all the time?
I'm guessing it's a party trick.
This was an episode full of twists and turns, not unlike the crystalline entity itself.
Very beginning of the show, we learned something about Riker.
What do we learn?
Well, I'm not sure.
Carries around a bottle of wine.
I think right. And how does she know that? Unless you have to include a manifest every time you beam down to a colony.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. How does she happen to know that he brought a bottle of wine? Or does she just know him that well? And these are the questions, right? So Riker's down there and he's like, hey, baby, except, not in the usual Riker way, because apparently there is a history between these people, right?
Yeah.
And so he's, all... So why do you want to colonize anyway? And she's like, you're adventurous. And he's like, well, I thought you pioneers were adventurous. And she's like, yeah, but, it's all about finding the right place to put down roots. And Riker's like, oh, put down roots. Tell me more about that over dinner. And I'm like, okay. Does Riker now see his inn? Or is Riker actually thinking, I could live the rest of my life with her? I mean, is she Miss Right or is she Miss Right now? And he's saying whatever needs to be said to get to dessert.
Still talking about ladyfingers, aren't we?
Maybe so.
That is a really good question. I kind of started my note taking with that scene, as you did too. Clearly.
How could you not? It's like at the very beginning, and it's like, wow. Either Riker is telling us something completely different about his character, or this is more about Riker's character than I want to know.
Yeah. Well, there's something that I keep having to ask myself every time I get a glimpse into Riker's personal life like this. I mean, we have to ask, well, is this a sort of a product of the reality of TV production? You have different writers coming in to do different shows. You've got... really from week to week, at least in Star Trek The Next Generation, this sort of question of, well, are we doing things that continue long arcs or are we not? Are we going back to this idea of purely episodic, or are we doing things that build long character stories, long arcs? So there's a little bit of, I don't know, a little bit of ambiguity when it comes to that. And then I have to ask myself, well, are there messages here that are implicit that maybe we're picking up on totally accidentally from an actual intended message by the writers or producers or developers of Star Trek? I looked at this and the first thing I thought was, okay, are we trying to say something about sex in the 24th century again with Riker's quote-unquote relationship with Carmen? Because we have seen him anywhere from, falling in love with a hologram to his on again, off again with Deanna, that he can just sort of pick up whenever he pleases or whenever she pleases. Like, oh, hey, we're alone for a few hours on this planet. Yeah, why not?
Right.
It's really strange. And then it seems to also not even be a problem or even a question that when he goes someplace and encounters another female that strikes his fancy, well, that's cool too. So to me, there's one of two ways to look at it. Either Star Trek is actually trying to say something about the nature of relationships in the future, whether they be romantic or just purely sexual, or this is just the reality of making a TV show. And some writers say, well, Riker is sort of the Kirk-like character. He's the young, brash kind of action guy of the series. So if we're going to have anything romantic happen, it'll happen with him.
Yeah, except what happened here is different. Look, I got no problem. I mean, it's funny, but I've got no problem with Riker having dessert every episode. I'm fine with that, as long as the woman, with whom, or the other person, the other entity with whom he is participating is along for the ride. What actually struck me on this one is he misleading Carmen? Is he saying, hey, I could be Mr. Forever,
Yeah, right.
Or, I mean, now the other thing is, it seems that, I mean, she actually says, as you know, I make a wonderful dessert. So this is not their first time communicating, let's say, having dinner, let's say.
Yeah.
And so maybe this is just what they do every time. You fall into patterns with people, I hear. You fall into patterns with people, where you'll talk about things that maybe aren't going to be real things forever, but I mean, they're the things that you talk about when you're there. I mean, maybe this is the dynamic of their relationship. She did not strike me as somebody who was going to be easily fooled by anything that he was saying. I just found it interesting that I wasn't even caught on the sex part, except for the part where Riker is saying things that no way Riker would say that. He won't leave the Enterprise for his own command. He's certainly not going to leave the Enterprise for a colony. Now, I do believe that he could leave the Enterprise for a woman, but we've only seen her for maybe 3 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's hooking up with an ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
Let's say with that. And girlfriend, you can use the term as loosely as you want to.
I have no problem saying girlfriend. Honestly, this is like Kirk dropping in on Carol Marcus 3 years later. Like David's born, but maybe he's away at camp or something like that. And Kirk's like, no.
Omicron Theta, that would be tragic.
That'd be interesting, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And, Kirk's like, no, really, maybe I'll stay. Okay, yeah, no.
I think what's interesting to me is that, there is something that is a little out of step with Riker that you have to ask, what are his motivations there? Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we know what's motivating him, but is that really a lie? Or is that just something that is different because this is Carmen and they have a different relationship? Yeah. But then I have no problem believing that even if those colonists had survived and even if they were fine and even if they had terrific dessert one night or multiple nights, when he goes back to the Enterprise and Deanna says, so how was your visit to the colony on Malona 4? He's like, it was great. And she says, I bet it was great. Hope you had a good time. How is that, Carmen?
Yeah.
Well, because there's just something so kind of
matter of fact,
acceptable about everything and matter of fact. And it's very interesting because even if it's not intended, there is this implicit thing there about sex in the 24th century. Maybe that's a whole other episode of Mission Log.
It is. Well, it is a whole other episode of Mission Log. I will say, though, I cannot remember another character who was on screen for maybe 4 minutes that I actually wanted to know so much more about.
Yeah,
I actually
she's
want
terrific.
to know. Well, she's great, but I want to know about their relationship, because just that line of talk between them, it just opens up so many questions and possibilities about Riker's past and Riker's motivation and who this woman might have actually been to him.
Right.
One wonders if there's any fanfic or maybe a novel. All right. So I want to talk about, I mentioned the conversation that we were going to talk about later.
Yep.
And now is later. Kind of crazy how that works. The crystalline entity. Time to kill it, says Dr. Marr. Her position is very understandable. Her son died, as did thousands of other people. Right. Riker's position is it's probably time to kill the crystalline entity. His girlfriend, maybe, died, as have thousands of other people. Picard's position is principled. Yeah. I know where we're supposed to come down on that, and I don't think you'll surprise me with your answer, but where do you come down with, among the three?
I have to come down on Picard's side, because here's the thing. That thing did kill thousands, yes. We completely and utterly don't understand anything about it. And I think that Picard's analogy about the sperm whale eating cuttlefish was a great analogy. I even wondered if we would get to the point of doing sort of the scorpion and the frog parable. You know that one, right?
I can't help it. It's in my nature.
Exactly. Yeah. So there might have been something that we ended there. Maybe even if we had ended up being able to communicate with the crystalline entity, that would have been a whole other type of ending for the show. Maybe we would have been compelled to kill it if we knew that it would simply continue on, that it had no regard for the lives that it was taking. Maybe that would have been a new and different ethical dilemma for them to face. I think the problem with Dr. Marr and with Riker is that they are... even if it's 10%, they're coming from a place of revenge. And that's that 10% that you've got to get completely eradicated before you can look at this from a rational, reasonable point of view. Now, that ration and reason might eventually lead you to the place that you can kill it. But Picard is the one who has always said, when it comes to diplomacy, you try. And then if you fail, you try again. And then you keep trying and you keep trying and you keep trying. You know, I don't know what it would take to push Picard to say that he had no other choice but to kill it.
Of course you do. Conspiracy. I was going to ask you if this actually changes your feelings. If this changes your feelings about conspiracy at all. I mean, in conspiracy, they find out that it's like big bugs taking over people's heads. And I'll grant you that is not something you want. But he and Riker look at each other, don't even say anything, turn around and shoot the dude. Right? There's Remek's head debris all over the place, and nobody owes anybody any money for that. It's just a fun callback. But I mean, does that change your feeling at all about how they acted in conspiracy? Because if memory serves, you were like, oh no, they absolutely had to kill him.
Yeah, well, there didn't seem to be any opportunity to communicate with those things or even keep them away.
That's true.
You know? Yeah. So there would have been maybe a different thing if you could say, okay, well, we chalk up Remek as a loss, right? But maybe we can get a big bell jar to keep one of those things under glass for a little while and figure out what it is.
Like Beverly kept her bug boyfriend. Well, girlfriend. I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Hey,
which
all
one
of
now.
the above, Ken.
In the
all
host,
of the
right?
above.
In the host.
Yeah, the host.
Like that. Yeah.
Because at least Picard had somewhat the luxury of time. To say there's one thing, we know where it is, and we know we can defend ourselves from it. Worf said that the shields would work. They knew that they could use sort of a modified photon torpedo to destroy it if they had to. So all of these things are working in their favor, and that's all Picard's doing is buying time. And hopefully in that time you come to a peaceful resolution. I don't think the little bugs in conspiracy were really... maybe given a chance, but I don't think they were really in it for the possibility of communication. We don't know, but we're kind of pushed up against a wall at that point.
Yeah. So if you had a different answer for the conspiracy thing, then I was going to ask you about Armus, but You're not wrong. I still think it would have been better if Picard had killed Armus and then had been racked with guilt by it. Except, of course, it's more Gene Roddenberry to say, no, don't kill him. Leave him there.
Yeah, right.
Amazing,
right.
By the way. I feel like a dork, and maybe this should be in the next segment. Or maybe I could say in every segment that I feel like a dork. I don't know. But
we are doing a Star Trek podcast, Ken.
So. That's true. Actually, I'll save this part to the next segment. I apologize.
Okay.
So
right,
stick around to find out one of the reasons I'm a dork.
Okay, cool. I just want to say that I love that scene between Picard and Riker in the Ready Room. I think it really, it's one of those moments where you can call it bonk bonk on the head, but they really sort of narrow down what the ethical, moral dilemma / message is of the show. That just, in a few moments, it gives you the perfect sort of nugget to chew on with what's going on. And I like that it's preceded with the callback to what just happened to Carmen, because it does, maybe I would feel differently, probably not, but maybe I'd feel slightly differently if we hadn't just been reminded of Carmen's death and that she actually meant something to Riker. That's driven home by essentially everybody on the ship knowing that she was Riker's girlfriend or ex-girlfriend or whatever the case may be, on again, off again. And he feels compelled to write something to her family.
Yeah.
We're really putting an emotional button on it before he gets into this. So I felt like through this episode, there was definitely a shade of the devil in the dark. But this has a much different outcome. And it's sort of gripping to see that outcome play in the end. I don't think that we in the audience are supposed to side for even 1 minute with killing the entity before trying to communicate with it. I'm glad that you led into this by asking that. And the tension on the bridge during that scene feels very genuine. I love all the reaction shots that they get from everybody during when they realize what's happening, because it's very quick, and the crystalline entity isn't a thing with a face that we can see emotions in, but we feel it because of the cast reaction. I did wonder that, like I said before, if they had been able to talk, would there have been a different outcome, or would it have gone an even darker turn and we decided that we just would have had to have killed it anyway? But yeah, that's kind of where I was led by the story, is thinking that there's a beauty to trying to do some kind of understanding and making the enemy not an enemy, or even if it is an enemy, there's at least some attempt at understanding what's happening there. And Picard's the only guy who figured it out. At first.
Well, you say Picard's the only guy who figured it out. I got to say big props, and maybe it's just because the writer didn't either know that much or care that much about Worf, but I love the fact that it is not Worf. It is, in fact, the kindly seeming old woman on the ship who's like, oh, we got to kill this. We so have to kill this. Worf never once. And then the follow-up conversation is not between Worf and Picard, talking about the tactical reasons they should go ahead and kill it. It's Riker. I mean, it's, I love the fact that it was not Worf who said, well, obviously you're going to blow it up. Right. Because no, it turns out not. And I really appreciate the fact that he was never the guy to say. I mean, he was the guy who's like, yeah, okay, I'll go ahead and fix it so you can if you need to. But that he was never one to argue for it was kind of a neat thing. Although maybe it was just not, Michael Dorn's week.
Right. Well, Picard has sort of the important line in all of this. Crystalline entity has as much right to be here as we do. Again, sort of making sure that we understand the perspective of where we are in the universe. So if you want to make that something that is a very narrow microcosm for us being here on this earth, or if you do want to take it literally, our place in the universe, well, there are all kinds of other things out there that may in fact be dangerous, but they may unknowingly or unwittingly dangerous. This might just be a thing, and that thing needs to be understood. So at the very least, even if that thing continues to be an enemy, we understand it better and know how to get out of the way. That might be the real value in it at some point.
I like the almost Kobayashi Maru face by the people in the cave. Riker says, if we go out there and that thing's still out there, we're dead. And Crusher says, if we stay in here, we're dead. Huh. Yeah. I mean, luckily, we had a third party then come in and say, all right, coast is clear, you can come outside. But honestly, you could do an interesting show just about that.
Yeah, for real.
Maybe there's something out there that could get us. We know we're going to die in here, but we're probably going to die out there. So which one are we going to do? There's not a huge amount of conversation around that, I don't think. I just found it really interesting, just summed up in those 2 lines. Wow, you were really on the horns of a dilemma at that point. I wonder what they're going to... Oh, somebody else, okay.
Right. Yeah, that could have taken a much darker turn as well. Yeah, well, I agree.
I'm not thinking they're going to start eating people or anything. I mean, not a darker turn. Not. It just would have been more of an examination of the position they were in. I thought the position they were in was worthy of examination. But, now you and I get to do that instead of them because, Worf showed up and started blasting things to get to people.
I have an answer for you.
Okay.
Send the robot.
Send the robot? The robot's already in there.
Yeah, exactly. So if you need to go out and figure out if the coast is clear, send the robot.
Well, but once he moves the rocks, if the thing's out there, because we've seen it can go straight into a spaceship without actually going into the spaceship. It's the pile of rocks with the reflective metal, whatever, that's keeping the entity from knowing that they're in there or getting to them, right? So if Data dislodges the thing, that's all the opening the crystalline entity would need. And I said it was going to be next segment before you found out why I was dork.
I think Data's fast. I think, send him, everybody go to the other end of the cave. We're going to send the robot and he'll check it out. He can sort of be the canary at that point.
All right. You tie for dork.
Okay. Very good. I think one of the other things that's sort of interesting to me about this episode is that we have Star Trek again exploring an aspect of death a little bit here. Maybe not as major, but when we talked about Tasha Yar's death and how easy it would be to just recreate her in the holodeck, or how Wesley sees his father in there, we talked about how that could really mess someone up to prevent a really useful period of grieving. Dr. Marr is still grieving. She is still so hurt, and rightfully so. And it's tragic that she can't reconcile the loss of her son and tries to hold on to that idea in Data. And I don't mean that she should get over it. That's absolutely the wrong phrase to use. But to accept and reconcile the reality of her situation. It really screws her up that she has this opportunity to pretend like her son is alive in this way. It's a very different thing from just picking up a picture or having a memory.
I'm sorry. Well, you say it screws her up. How?
I think that she comes into the situation hurt. She comes into the situation with a kind of professional detachment. But I don't think that she really loses her sense of what's going on until she has this idea that her son is, quote unquote, alive in Data. I think that's something that sends her over the edge.
Oh, really? Because I really do. I think this was her plan all along.
Oh, I don't think so.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, would she want to see the crystalline entity dead?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that.
Okay.
But I think that it's the exposure to the pressure and the sense of what's going on with Data that I think turns something in her head. See, I really do.
I think we've got a Lady or the Tiger thing here. I think it's going to be up to you, and there's nothing that's really going to indicate. I personally think she came on board. I think the reason that she's devoted herself for however many years it's been now to tracking this thing and finding this thing is to kill it. I think she's wanted revenge from, day one, because she feels bad about how she's treated her son. Or feels bad that she wasn't there with him or for him, or that she left him in a place where he ended up dying.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no.
She's like Liam Neeson in this thing. In a Taken movie. Not like in Schindler's List, in like a Taken movie or something like that.
No, I don't doubt that all of those emotions are there. I don't doubt that all of that stuff is what's there sort of, eating away at her. Mm-hmm. But I think that maybe under different circumstances, that impulse maybe would have been a little more controlled or controllable. It's only that she has Data there in the first place to help figure out how to communicate with the entity that happens at all. It would be a very different thing if all they had was a set of shields and a photon torpedo, and the captain is the only one who can say fire photon torpedoes, unless we picture a whole different story with this, nice old woman scientist running down the torpedo tube, knocking out everybody in her way to push the fire button to make that thing go. Maybe that's a different story. But seeing this play out, seeing her reaction to Data, I thought about psychics. I thought about the tragedy of people who lose someone and then go to a total stranger to try to come to grips with their sense of loss. I mean, to me, that is one of the most horrible things that a human being can do to another human being. Now, Data isn't bilking anyone out of money. He's not lying about what he's doing. He says very specifically, this is a mechanical thing. I have access to a journal. I know what his voice sounds like. I can recreate that, given those very limited parameters. For Dr. Marr, though, she has to get hit with that cold reality of her situation at the end to sort of snap her out of it. And I don't know if she's truly snapped out of it. It was doubly tragic when they get into the turbo lift to see her holding his hand. And then when they get back down into the room and she grabs his hand again and she is treating him motherly, for lack of a better word. She really sees Rennie in Data. And that is so completely misguided that it's painful, and that's where I mean that she's lost it in that respect. But I thought that this is a very human reaction. It's a very human thing to inappropriately put that on someone else. And unfortunately, there are people in the world who see that as an opportunity to take advantage of others. But in this, it's really just a mistake,
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I find it weird, actually, the transference or what's a projection that we do in death, like when other people die. For some reason lately, rest in peace has been bothering me a lot. I don't know why that is, but I think it's mostly because I live on Twitter. I don't tweet nearly as much as I read. But I check Twitter more times a day than is healthy. I feel fairly certain.
Right.
And anytime somebody dies, especially it was when Nancy Reagan died, relatively recently as we record this, not yesterday, but not 10 years ago.
Sure.
And there were all these people who put rest in peace. And I thought, I'm going to go on a limb and say that Nancy Reagan lived in peace. But the idea that, that, I don't know, she says that she hopes that Rennie could be at peace at the end of this. And she's not looking for peace for Rennie. She's looking for peace for herself. She's looking for something that's going to make her feel good about the way she acted or didn't act with her son the whole time.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I think when we say rest in peace, I mean, half of it's like, well, that's just the thing you say, so you say it. I think the other half of it is what is it? The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. I mean, maybe the people who most ardently say rest in peace are really hoping that they find some peace at some point. I don't know.
Sure.
But yeah, she's not after peace for Rennie. She says that she hopes that he can be at peace. He is what he is, and nothing that we do on this plane is going to change what's happening on any plane that he might exist on, should he actually exist on any other plane. What she's hoping for is that she can come to peace or be at peace with it. And of course, then finding out, oh, by the way, he would be really embarrassed by you right now. He would be sad that you just threw away everything you ever worked for, everything you did. Hey, the reason that he died is because you left him to go do this thing, and now you can't do that thing anymore. I mean,
right.
So if there was any shot at him having peace, let's say he was not at peace this whole time, she certainly just wrecked it again. But really what she's looking for is peace for herself. And it turns out probably that's not going to be found pulling a Liam Neeson. I got to say one other thing really quickly.
Right.
How do we know that we are not going to end up with like 150 crystalline entities in about 3 years?
Oh, I know.
Because we don't know how this thing works. We just see pieces of it going all over the place. I could just see, had it gone to season 8, season 9, Captain Log. Holy cow, do we have crystalline entities all over the place. And they each speak a different language because they all grew up individually because they got blown to... the heavens 30 acres, and now we got trouble right here in
it's crystals everywhere. It's like a gift shop in Sedona. They're just everywhere. You can't stop them.
But these are not healing crystals, sadly. These are destroying crystals and make lousy sun catchers because did we mention destroying?
With Dr. Marr behind us, and the crystalline entity all over the place, it is time for us to figure out what we have learned from Silicon Avatar.
Ken, we've been talking for nearly an hour, and honestly, I've forgotten everything that we've said in the last hour, completely out of my mind. The only thing that I remember is you saying that you're a dork. So I really want to come back to that.
Really?
I really want to explore.
You don't remember
why
the part
you're
where
a dork.
I said you were a dork as well? Really?
Don't remember that at all.
Just remember
Don't
me
remember
being a dork. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So why, Ken, are you a dork? And if you want to phrase that into your answer for, does this episode hold up or not, then great, you can do that. But really, why are you a dork?
Because I believe it was just last week that I was saying we are seeing Star Trek go from being sort of Gene Roddenberry's vision of Star Trek to the people that will come after Gene Roddenberry's vision of Star Trek. And yet here we have 75% maybe Gene Roddenberry's vision of Star Trek. Here's this thing that we don't understand. It certainly seems like it must be evil. It must be our enemy. And so what we're going to do is try to talk to it and find out whether or not it is actually our enemy. Now, I think a complete Gene Roddenberry read would be, and in the end, the scientist comes around as well. Dr. Marr comes around as well. That doesn't happen. And maybe that wouldn't be his read on it. Maybe he would say, oh, do you not see the tragedy? Okay, now do you not see the tragedy?
2 words, Janice Lester.
Remind me.
Turnabout intruder.
Oh, okay. Wow. I've blocked that out of my mind. I remember not liking that episode, and that's really all I remember at this point.
I don't think that is a totally indefensible episode, but I only throw it out there. I mean, it's mostly indefensible, but not totally indefensible. Right. I only throw it out there because Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek, and that, to whatever extent was his or wasn't his, it also had people who went off the deep end who couldn't be brought back.
That's true.
So I think this has kind of elements of a lot of different Gene Roddenberry Star Trek in it.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry I interrupted you. Just had to get that out.
No problem at all. No problem at all. So if you said I'm answering in here as well whether or not the episode holds up, I would say yes. I mean, the pacing is a little strange because we start off with this sort of, starts with adventure. Let's sit in a cave for Act 1. Okay, now let's go meet this other old character who's kind of weird and off. And, oh, wait, we're ending with adventure or discovery or, nope, turns out adventure. But, I mean, it brings up a lot of questions. If you had asked me when we started recording this, if this episode was going to go past an hour, I would have said no. No, not when we started recording, I think I had a feeling. When I first watched it, I'd have said, no, this is pretty cut and dry. But they're actually... There's a tremendous amount here to sort of dissect and discuss, I think. You mentioned liking the scene between Riker and Picard. We have said that it gets silly talking about what a great actor Picard is, or Patrick Stewart is, but every now and then he'll give you something else. When Riker comes to him, there is pain in Picard. Having to explain it, having to say it, having to open his eyes to maybe this is your feelings and not, your actual thinking part of your brain here. I felt like there was an unstated and understated but incredible sadness in Picard that, okay, I'm alone on this one, it turns out.
Yeah.
Because the guy who's always got my back is here going, yeah, I think you're wrong here. And so he's actually got to stand up. He's got to stand up to everybody at that point and say, no, what we said was right for us to do yesterday is still right for us to do today. And I'm sorry that you can't see that, but it's what we're going to do. So go write your letter and let's move on. So, I mean, to me, yes, this episode holds up very well. What about you, sir?
Yeah, I remembered very little about this when we came back to it for the podcast. I remember that there's a crystalline entity and it comes back. And that's about it. I remember exactly how it played out. And it's interesting because when this was my week to write the synopsis, and when you and I do this every other week, I wonder if you have the same reaction that I do. Like, there are some episodes where you just keep writing and writing and writing. And you go, wow, there is so much plot. Can we please just sort of narrow this down and get to the meat of it? Because really, that's all we want to talk about. And then there are other episodes like this one where it was pretty easy to write because there's not a lot of plot, but there's a lot going on. And the more interesting stuff is all that's going on that isn't just plot detail after plot detail after plot detail. Sort of like a Richard Linklater movie. Like you watch it and like the plot is like, maybe the plot's a little thin, whatever. But at the end of it, you're like, hey, actually a lot happened there. And, I got to experience these characters. So that's what's cool about it. I'm glad that this wasn't just a story about prejudice, because I was jumping to that conclusion in the beginning. I thought, oh, okay, as soon as we introduce this character and she hates Data, that's what the story will be about. But no. That was just a little slice of that character.
Right.
And what we got instead was this complex and emotionally deep character in Dr. Marr. And I love the parallel to Devil in the Dark. It's this classic Star Trek story of understanding and being careful and exhausting every means to do what is right rather than what is convenient or what feels good, Yeah. They effectively built sympathy for a bad guy. And like Devil in the Dark, they built sympathy for a character that was the farthest thing from human you could get. Mm-hmm. You can only do that in science fiction. That's great. That's great. It was interesting that the more research that I did, I found that there were a lot of people who are not thrilled with this episode. But I kind of think it depends on what you're looking for when you come to it. I think that unequivocally it holds up. It feels like Star Trek, but it feels like Star Trek in that we get this story about understanding an alien. We also get this personal story of a woman who is going through a lot.
Yeah.
And they do such a good job of not just making her two-dimensional and hateful, because that would have been too easy to do. So, I think there's a lot to like here. I think it definitely holds up, and it is representative of, I think, what you and I really respond to when we talk about what's good about Star Trek. Doesn't mean it's the best episode, but this represents what is good about when we say good Star Trek.
Can I ask a question, though? Would it hold up if you hadn't been watching all of TNG to this point? Because it's interesting to me, you said at the beginning, nobody wanted to do a sequel.
Yeah.
I personally don't feel like this is a sequel. I feel like it is. I mean, it's a recurrent bad guy, but if we had never seen it before, they could have just, written another 20 seconds to say, oh, yes, we've seen this before, in some other place, even if we hadn't seen it. At the same time, what interests me about Riker is how much this says about Riker, a character that I feel like I know very well. What interests me about, I guess the question I have is, does it hold up because of the way we're watching Star Trek and because of the way a lot of people watch it as it was being broadcast? Or could you sit somebody, because they do enough backstory, could you sit somebody who has never seen Star Trek before? And I'm not saying this is the best episode to start them with, but if they'd never seen Star Trek before, would you expect them to take something away from it as well?
I think generally it holds up on its own. Okay. I think there's better payoff if you already saw what happened before, only because this is a show that has a good deal of technobabble in it and a good deal of reference in it.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to say Omicron Theta, but it's another thing to see in data lore, oh, okay, here are the drawings that the kids did. Here is the terror that they felt. Like you can kind of make that mental connection then. Right. If I was just watching this and I'd only watched it one time, the name Omicron Theta might go in one ear and out the other. And I might not make a mental note about what that was and what that meant in another episode. So it's definitely better with that other one. And I'll tell you this, one thing that I like about Star Trek, the further along that we go, and it's not just Next Gen, but a lot of other series and now with movies, sometimes I think they sort of throw the net too wide. And they will just keep introducing alien after alien after alien. And you get just a 2% understanding of who that is and why they're there. The crystalline entity was a big, scary thing. And then it left. And then you were like, okay, well, it still exists. It's still out there and can destroy anything.
Right.
That leaves a big question about what's happening in our little corner of the galaxy here.
Yeah.
So I like it when a story can at least create a little roundness and a little bookend to something that is introduced that would otherwise, we talked about this in the original series. Kirk goes around ripping civilizations out from under people and then goes away.
Yep.
And you still have to wonder, wow, if you do this week after week, then the galaxy is just littered with possibly tragic stories.
Yes, indeed.
So I like that it is a second part for all of those reasons. And I do think it holds up maybe a little bit better if you've seen the original. Well, not the original, but seen its prequel.
Right. Talk about messages, if you would.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot in there. Some, probably pretty obvious. Dr. Marr, she learns a lesson at some point about doing something terrible, letting her prejudice lead her when it comes to Data. She decides to see Data exactly as she wants to, which is to say responsible for the colonists' deaths at Omicron Theta, despite the fact that there is no evidence particularly for him. Although, Ken, you make a pretty interesting argument that exactly 50% of androids are evil in Star Trek so far. Right. But as far as Star Trek goes, there's no bad time to remind us that we shouldn't assume the worst about people because of maybe their relationships to other people or their backgrounds or their work, et cetera, et cetera. Paint with whatever brush you choose in that spot. But then she does something terrible and tragic again, which is to say that she invests Data with her own needs. And there's not really a lesson there, because I don't know if you can just talk somebody out of that.
Well, I would say one of the lessons there would be don't be consumed by grief. I mean, you actually have to do the work to get through it. Otherwise, that ends up being the rest of your life, right? Or don't be consumed by guilt, maybe. I mean, it's such an easy thing to say, but, that's what Star Trek is, right? Hey, don't be vengeful. Yeah. See you next week. Hey, Don't be consumed by guilt or grief. See you next week. I mean, but I mean, that's what these parables are. I mean, even if they're not the easiest things in the world to do, at least they point us in the right direction. And no, we didn't get the big soliloquy at the end or the big monologue at the end about, she was consumed by grief and it cost so much. I mean, I think it's inherent, right? Wow, she never worked through the death of her son. So now she has screwed up everything in her life. So you say there's no message there, and you're right. There was no bonk bonk on the head message, but I found myself thinking, wow, maybe if she'd spent some time in a counselor's office instead of learning everything about the thing that killed her son. You ever heard J.O. Barr talk about writing The Crow?
No.
So J.O. Barr was the comic, was the guy who wrote the story for The Crow. And The Crow was built on vengeance, both the comic book character and the whole project, because Obar's fiance was killed by a drunk driver. And it was when the movie came out that people were interviewing him, and they were like, "So that must have been really cathartic for you to do the comic." And he said, "Yeah, you'd think so, but here's what happened. I ended up spending years fixating on this event. I ended up spending years fixating on what happened to her and revenge. So yeah, I'm glad The Crow is successful, but you say it must have been a good thing for me, and in retrospect, I'm not sure."
Wow.
So this might actually be a message for Dr. Marr as well. Like maybe go to the beach. Maybe have a good cry. Do something besides feel bad about how you left your son and what happened to him, because things only get worse after that.
Yeah.
So there's a possible tie-in there.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's, a lesson here about revenge, and there's an interesting question at the heart of this, which we talked about earlier, which is, a necessary course of action versus something that is influenced by revenge. That hint of vengeance in Riker's tone or in Dr. Marr's tone to say, well, no, we have to go kill it, rightfully gives Picard some pause to question the motivation. And as we learn in the end, that phrase, peace at last, that Dr. Marr said, well, that peace does not come from taking vengeance. Marr thought it would. But not only does it not, the problem was not killing killing the crystalline entity, is that she had wrapped up her emotions completely inappropriately in Data, and thinking that this action would solve this for her. So there is no comfort to be taken by acting in a vengeful manner. And I think that's a pretty Star Trek message as well.
And then, of course, there's the other big Star Trek message. The thing that looks like the enemy might not be the enemy. It's just a thing that you don't know enough about. We start to get a hint that they're going to be able to communicate with the crystalline entity. Of course, it gets destroyed before we know for certain. But it seemed like it was going, as you pointed out, it seemed like it was going devil in the dark way. Not so much like, once they start talking to it, then it's going to be saying, ugly bags of mostly water. Get ready to be flayed.
Right.
And so, exactly. The implied Star Trek message, too, of your enemy is not necessarily your enemy. It may just be a great big misunderstanding. A great big light-catching crystalline misunderstanding.
I think maybe, did I hear it in a TV show once, or maybe a movie? Or maybe, Ken, I heard it in both a TV show and a movie. I believe it was a line that went something like, there's no such thing as the unknown. There are only things that are temporarily hidden. Maybe that would apply there, too. Maybe it would. Mm-hmm. Was that T.J. Hooker you heard that on? I think it was, yeah. I totally forgot. But you nailed it. Yeah. Might have been. Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment, executive producer Rod Roddenberry. You can find out more at roddenberry.com, including the Roddenberry store, events. You can find out where the Roddenberry team will be appearing at conventions. So do check out roddenberry.com. For more exciting Star Trek podcasts, check out Trek FM. That's trek.fm. And for the latest in Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com. Next week, disaster.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. No actual crystals were harmed in the making of this episode. However, a large number of electrons were terribly inconvenienced. End transmission.